In the outer edge of the Milky Way, far beyond the familiar trade routes, there existed a planet called Vareth. The world was harsh, carved by storms and mountains that touched the thin upper air. To live there was to fight every day. The cold winds shaped its people into strong beings with silver skin and sharp eyes. Among them was one name every child knew, Commander Sarah Venn. Sarah was not only a soldier, she was a symbol of courage itself. From her earliest years she had learned that fear was weakness and weakness was death. Her people valued strength above all, and Sarah had never disappointed them. At 16 she fought beasts twice her size. At 20 she led her first command. At 30 she became the youngest commander in Vareth's history. There were songs about her, songs that told how she fought off 10 Zikran soldiers with a broken blade, or how she saved her troops by carrying a plasma cannon on her back when others couldn't even lift it. The galaxy had many heroes, but none like her. And yet Sarah Venn had never known fear. The Vareth Defense Fleet orbited their world like a ring of silver fire. On the flagship Valiant Dawn, Sarah stood before the observation window watching the stars move silently through the void. Her armor reflected their light and her golden eyes were calm. "Commander," said her second-in-command Lieutenant Drex, walking up behind her. "All borders are secure. No Zikran patrols in the last 3 cycles." "Good," Sarah replied. Her voice carried quiet strength, the kind that made soldiers straighten their backs. "But they will come again." "They always do." "Yes, Commander." Drex hesitated, glancing at the report in his hand. "There is something else. A strange signal near the outer rim. Small ship damaged. Not Zikran. The code doesn't match any known species." Sarah turned. "How close?" "Within 2 light minutes. We can intercept." She paused for only a moment. "Bring it in." The order was simple, but the tone behind it meant everything. When Sarah gave an order, no one questioned her. The recovery crew moved quickly. The unknown vessel was barely holding together, a small transport battered and scorched. When it was pulled into the hangar, engineers surrounded it with weapons ready. No one knew what might crawl out of that wreck. Sarah arrived in person. The crew stepped aside as she walked forward, her tall figure casting a long shadow under the hangar lights. She signaled to open the airlock. With a hiss of pressure, the door slid open. Inside was a single figure. He looked nothing like any creature they had seen. His body was smaller, his skin pale instead of silver, and his eyes, blue like the sea, watched them without fear. His breathing was rough, but his posture remained steady. "Identify yourself," Sarah commanded. The stranger looked at her, then spoke in a calm voice. "Captain Elias Ward, human, from Earth." The word human was unknown to most of the crew. They exchanged confused looks. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Earth?" she repeated. "That world was declared extinct centuries ago." "Not entirely," he said. "Some of us survived. Some of us kept going." His voice was quiet but carried a strange strength. Not loud, not proud, just steady. Later in the command chamber, the alien, no, the human, was examined and questioned. Scanners showed his body was fragile compared to a Varethi. His muscles were thinner, his bones less dense. Physically, he seemed weak. Yet he stood tall under the bright lights, never flinching even when surrounded by armed soldiers. "Why did you come here?" Sarah asked. "My ship was damaged. I wasn't aiming for your world. I was trying to survive." "You're far from home, Captain." "I've been far from home for a long time," he replied softly. Something about his tone caught her attention. It wasn't arrogance or fear. It was something else, something she couldn't quite name. Her second, Drex, crossed his arms. "Commander, he's too calm for someone surrounded by an armed crew. Maybe he's hiding something." Elias looked at Drex and said simply, "Fear doesn't help. It only makes you slower." That single sentence silenced the room. Even Sarah, who had heard every kind of battle speech in her life, felt something strange stir inside her. His words were simple, but they didn't sound like a lie. Over the next few days, the human remained aboard Valiant Dawn while his ship was examined. Sarah observed him quietly from a distance. He spent hours watching the stars, sometimes writing in a small digital logbook. One evening, Sarah joined him in the viewing deck. "You watch the stars like they mean something," she said. Elias smiled slightly. "They do. Each one holds a story. Back on Earth, we looked up at them and dreamed of what was out there. Turns out most of it was war." Sarah tilted her head. "You've seen war?" "I've lived through it," he said. "We fought to survive our own mistakes. Maybe that's what humans do best, keep fighting even when there's no reason left." Syrah frowned. You speak as if fear is your companion. It is, he said quietly. But fear can be a teacher. It reminds us what we're willing to lose. She stared at him for a long moment, unsure how to respond. For her, fear had always been a word in stories, something that happened to lesser beings. Yet here was someone fragile, soft-spoken, and smaller than any of her warriors, speaking of fear as if it was a friend, not an enemy. When she finally left the viewing deck, she realized her heart was beating faster than usual. It wasn't fear. It couldn't be. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more. The next day, the ship alarms sounded. Drex rushed into the command hall. Commander! Zycran scouts entering system range. Syrah's expression hardened instantly. All ships to battle positions. Shield charge to full. Prepare to intercept. Her soldiers obeyed at once, their movements sharp and practiced. The room came alive with energy, glowing screens and flashing lights. Elias entered quietly, watching the organized chaos. You're under attack? Yes, Syrah said. And we'll crush them before they get close. Then let me help, he said. Drex laughed. You? You can barely handle our gravity field. Elias ignored the insult. I can read your enemy's formations. Let me see your tactical map. Syrah studied him for a moment, then gestured for the data display. Show him. Within seconds, the human studied the patterns. You're spreading your ships too wide. They'll flank you from the asteroids. Pull your second line closer and use your smaller vessels as decoys. Her officers looked skeptical. Syrah hesitated, but something in his confidence made her nod. Do it. Minutes later, the Zycrans fell right into the trap. Their ships were crushed in a wave of plasma fire. The battle ended faster than any in recent record. When the cheering began, Syrah looked toward Elias. He was silent, arms crossed, eyes calm as ever. How did you know? She asked. He shrugged. We fought like that once. Against an enemy much worse. Worse than the Zycrans? He met her gaze. Ourselves. That night, Syrah sat alone in her chamber, staring at the quiet stars outside. For the first time in her long life, she couldn't sleep. The words of the human echoed in her mind. Fear can be a teacher. It reminds us what we're willing to lose. She realized that she didn't truly understand that feeling. She had faced death countless times and never hesitated. But something about this strange man, his calm, his mystery, his quiet strength, made her uneasy in a way battles never had. Was this what fear felt like? She smiled faintly, shaking her head. Impossible, she whispered. No one can frighten me. But somewhere deep inside, she knew the truth. The human had already begun to change something within her. Days passed since the battle, and Valiant Dawn floated in silent orbit around Vareth. The ship had earned another victory, but something had changed among its crew. The human, Captain Elias Ward, had become the talk of every deck. Some admired him for his quick mind and calm attitude. Others whispered that he was too mysterious, too strange to be trusted. But one person couldn't stop thinking about him, Commander Syrah Venn. She had faced every kind of creature in the galaxy, but never someone like him. He was fragile, quiet, and yet unbreakable. The thought both fascinated and disturbed her. On the fourth day, Syrah entered the ship's training hall. Dozens of soldiers were sparring, their metallic blades clashing under the glowing lights. She was about to join them when she saw Elias at the edge of the room, sitting cross-legged, watching. He looked out of place among the tall, armored Varethi warriors. He wore only a simple black uniform and no armor at all. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. Syrah approached him. You observe, but you do not train, she said. Elias looked up. Your people fight with strength and speed. I can't match that. Syrah crossed her arms. Then why watch? He smiled faintly. Because I can still learn. His answer surprised her. Most who couldn't fight would stay away from the training hall, but he stayed, curious and unashamed. Show me how humans fight, she said suddenly. He blinked, uncertain. You want me to fight you? Yes. I want to see if your courage is real. The soldiers nearby stopped what they were doing. All eyes turned toward them. It was rare for anyone to challenge Syrah, and unthinkable that a small off-worlder would accept. Elias rose slowly. I'll try, but I won't win. Syrah smiled slightly. We'll see. The floor cleared. Syrah took her stance, steady, sharp, like a blade ready to strike. Elias stood opposite her, his hands open, no weapon in sight. When she moved, it was like lightning. Her strike came fast, aimed at his shoulder, but Elias dodged, barely avoiding the hit. She attacked again, and again he moved aside. His steps were small but precise. He didn't fight to overpower her. He fought to endure. Minutes passed. The crew whispered in disbelief. Syra could crush metal, yet this human kept avoiding her hits, breathing evenly, eyes calm. Finally, she swept his legs, sending him to the floor. He fell hard, gasping, but still smiled. "You're fast," he said. "But you don't need fear to move that way. You move like someone who knows nothing can hurt her." Syra frowned. "And you move like someone who accepts pain before it happens." He nodded. "Because I felt it before." Her soldiers laughed, thinking he was making excuses. But Syra saw something different, an honesty that made her pause. She extended a hand to help him up. "Not bad for a weak creature," she said softly. "Not bad for a fearless one," he replied, smiling. After that day, Syra found herself meeting Elias more often. She invited him to join command discussions, to observe battle recordings, and even to walk through the gardens of the ship's biosphere deck. He was curious about everything. He asked questions about Verith history, their war traditions, and even their songs. "What does your song mean?" he asked one night as soldiers sang the Hymn of Fire. "It tells how we conquered fear," Syra explained. "Long ago, our ancestors were hunted by creatures in the dark. They learned to fight until fear became nothing." Elias nodded. "That's impressive. But do your people ever fight for something instead of against it?" She looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Fighting against fear is good. But sometimes the strongest reason to fight is not hate or pride, it's love or hope." The words felt strange to her. She had fought for duty, for honor, for her people, but never for something so gentle. "Love?" she repeated, almost unsure how the word felt on her tongue. Elias smiled slightly. "It's not weakness. It's what gives us the courage to face what truly scares us." That night, when she returned to her quarters, she couldn't sleep again. His words echoed in her mind like a quiet song she couldn't ignore. A few days later, Syra received a transmission from Verith's high command. The Zycran Empire had attacked a border colony. The colony was small, defenseless, and deep in enemy space. Drek stood by her side as the Council's hologram flickered. "Commander Ven, you are ordered to defend the colony immediately," said the Council leader. "But proceed with caution. The Zycrans are using new energy weapons. Losses may be high," Syra saluted. "We'll move at once." When the message ended, Elias stepped forward from the side of the room. "You're going into a trap," he said. She turned to him. "You think I fear traps?" "I think you should respect them," he replied calmly. "The Zycrans want you to attack fast. They know your style, bold, direct, fearless. They'll use it against you," Drek scowled. "You question our commander?" Elias didn't flinch. "No, I'm trying to keep her alive." The words hung in the air. No one dared speak. Syra studied him closely. "Then tell me, human. What do you suggest?" "Use deception. Let them believe you'll attack head-on but strike from the shadows. Fear their overconfidence instead of ignoring it." It was a strange idea. Fear as a weapon. Varithi strategy books never spoke of such things. But something about it made sense. "Prepare 2 decoy ships," Syra ordered finally. "We'll try it your way." Hours later, the Valiant Dawn and its fleet jumped through hyperspace. When they arrived at the colony, the Zycran armada was waiting, just as Elias predicted. The enemy ships charged forward, confident and loud. But the decoy fleet drew their fire while Syra's main fleet circled behind, hidden in the asteroid field. At her command, Varithi cannons opened fire. Plasma beams tore through the enemy ranks. Within minutes, the Zycran formation collapsed. The humans' plan had worked perfectly. When the battle was over, the crew cheered again. But this time, their eyes turned not just to Syra, but to Elias. Even Drex bowed slightly toward him. Syra approached him after the victory. "You fight without fear, but not without care," she said. "That's different from my people." Elias looked at her seriously. "You don't have to be afraid of fear itself. Sometimes it helps you see more clearly. It keeps you human, or whatever your kind calls your heart." Syra smiled faintly. "You speak like a teacher." "I speak like someone who's been wrong before," he replied. That evening, Syra invited him to her private chamber. The stars glowed outside like silver dust. "You risked much today," she said quietly. "You could have been wrong." "I was ready for that," Elias said. "Fear doesn't disappear. You just learn to live with it." She looked at him closely. "Why are you not afraid of me?" "Every being I've met trembles before me. He smiled slightly. Because I've seen worse things than death. Her eyes narrowed. Such as? Losing everything you care for, he said softly. Watching it fade, knowing you can't stop it. That's what fear really is, not dying, but losing. Syra stood silent. His words struck her deeper than any weapon. She realized that while she had faced death countless times, she had never cared enough to lose anything. Maybe that was why fear had never touched her. Elias looked at her with gentle eyes. You think being fearless makes you strong, but maybe strength comes from caring enough to be afraid. For a long time, neither spoke. The stars outside seemed to whisper as if agreeing with him. When Elias left the chamber that night, Syra stayed by the window. The human's words echoed again and again in her mind. She had built her entire life on the idea that courage meant the absence of fear, but now, for the first time, she doubted that truth. She looked out into the dark space beyond her world and whispered to herself, if fear is weakness, then why do his words make me feel stronger? Somewhere deep inside her, the first seed of fear, real fear, had finally been planted, and it did not feel like defeat. It felt like awakening. The victory at the border colony spread across Verith like wildfire. Commander Syra Ven was once again the hero of her people, but this time they spoke of another name beside hers. The human. The strange visitor who fought not with strength but with calm courage and clever ideas. On board the Valiant Dawn, Captain Elias Ward had become something unexpected, a quiet symbol of change. Many soldiers began to ask questions. They wanted to know more about Earth, about the humans who once lived there. And Syra. She found herself watching him more often than she cared to admit. One morning, Syra stood in the command hall as her crew reported new data. Lieutenant Drex read from his tablet. Commander, long-range sensors have detected a massive Zycran fleet near the Tarsus Belt. At least 3 battle carriers, maybe more. Syra nodded. They're moving faster than before. They're preparing something. Elias, who had been standing quietly at the back, stepped closer. They're not regrouping. They're gathering for a full assault. How do you know? Drex asked with a hint of doubt. Elias pointed at the star map. They're leaving supply trails behind. That's something only done before a major strike. They want to finish this war. Syra looked at him thoughtfully. You've seen this kind of build-up before, haven't you? Yes, Elias replied. Many times. Every war ends with someone trying to end it too quickly. The room fell silent. Even Drex, who once doubted him, didn't argue. Later, when the others left, Syra approached him near the observation window. You speak as if you've fought in many wars, she said. Elias's gaze stayed fixed on the stars. Too many. Humanity learned the hard way that victory means nothing if you lose your soul in the process. Your people, they sound like warriors, he smiled sadly. Not really. We were survivors. There's a difference. Syra studied him. His words always carried weight even when they were quiet. She, a commander of armies, suddenly felt like a student standing before a teacher. What happened to your world? She asked softly. He hesitated, then said, We thought we were the masters of everything. We built machines that could think, fight, and destroy faster than us. Then we lost control. The wars that followed burned our skies and oceans. Fear came back to us stronger than ever. But a few of us kept fighting, not to win, but to make sure someone remembered who we were. Syra's eyes softened. You survived fear by embracing it. He looked at her and nodded. That's the only way to live with it. A week later, their fears became real. A transmission arrived, urgent and heavy with static. Commander Syra Ven, said the voice of High Command. The Zycran fleet has launched a new weapon. Reports say it can destroy entire cities with a single blast. You must stop them before they reach Verith. Syra's jaw tightened. Understood. We move at once. When the signal ended, she turned to her officers. Prepare the fleet. We intercept at the Tarsus Belt. Elias stepped forward. You'll need more than courage for this fight. That weapon, they'll guard it heavily. I am not afraid, Syra said firmly. I know, Elias said gently. That's what worries me. She frowned. You think fear would make me stronger? I think awareness would, he replied. You can't fight something you refuse to understand. His tone wasn't disrespectful, it was honest. And it made her pause. For the first time, she didn't rush to answer. The fleet entered the Tarsus Belt hours later. Huge asteroids drifted slowly, glowing faintly from the nearby sun. The Zycran fleet was waiting, dark and massive. their ships shaped like black blades slicing through the void. Syra stood on the bridge, her eyes locked on the enemy flagship. Open communication. The hologram of a Zikran general appeared, tall, armored, eyes glowing red. "So the fearless Syra Ven comes to die," he sneered. "Your world will burn and your courage will die with it." Syra's tone was steady. "You will not reach my world," the general laughed. "You think you can stop the fire? Even your fear cannot save you now." The transmission cut, and the battle began. Something went wrong while generating the response. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Retry Usadir Part 4, 1300 words. Kale ko or interesting hona chahiye or third-person style mein likhni hai or simple basic English ka. Don't use any violated word. So please avoid any violated content, ChatGPT said. Sure. Here's Part 4, 1300 words of your HFY sci-fi story. No one could frighten her until the human appeared. Written in third person, using simple English, clean language, and keeping it engaging and emotional throughout. Part 4, Shadows of the Unknown. The war had returned to the stars. For weeks, the Zikran Empire launched attacks across the border systems. Every day brought new reports of lost colonies and broken fleets. Commander Syra Ven had faced countless battles before, but this time something was different. This time, she felt the weight of every life under her command, and it all began after she met Elias Ward. The human's words still echoed in her thoughts. Sometimes, strength comes from caring enough to be afraid. She now understood that courage wasn't about being without fear. It was about standing firm despite it. But soon Syra would face the greatest test of all. One evening, the valiant Dawn received an emergency signal from the Verethi capital. Syra was summoned to a high council meeting through holographic communication. When the shimmering figures appeared before her, their faces were grim. "Commander Ven," said the council leader, "the Zikrans have created a new weapon, a device capable of destroying entire planets." Syra straightened. "Impossible. Such energy cannot be controlled." "They have done it," replied the elder counselor. "Our scouts confirmed a weapon test. A small moon was vaporized in seconds." The silence in the chamber felt heavy. Syra spoke firmly. "Then we must strike first." The council leader shook his head. "No, the weapon is hidden deep within their territory. A direct assault would mean disaster. We cannot risk our fleet." Syra's eyes narrowed. "Then what do you expect me to do? Watch them destroy world after world?" Another council member sighed. "We will defend, not attack. Until we understand their weapon, we stay in position." The holograms faded, leaving Syra alone in the dim light. Her fists clenched. Waiting felt like weakness. Later that night, she stood by the viewing deck, staring at the endless stars. Elias joined her quietly. "You were in the meeting," he said softly. She nodded. "They are afraid. And you're not?" "I don't have time for fear." Elias looked at her with calm eyes. "Then you'll lose." Her head turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "You can't fight what you don't understand," he said. "Fear can show you what's hidden. If you ignore it, you'll walk right into the dark." Syra frowned. "You think fear is a weapon?" "I think it's a guide," Elias replied. "You said your people don't know fear. Maybe that's why the Zikrans keep surprising you." For a moment, she wanted to argue, but deep inside, she knew he was right. A few days later, new reports arrived. The Zikrans had destroyed another colony, one that Syra herself had once protected. The faces of her fallen soldiers appeared on the display screen. She stood in silence, her chest tight. Drex entered. "Commander, what are your orders?" Syra looked up. "We end this," Drex frowned. The council said, "I don't care what the council said. If they won't fight, we will." She turned to Elias. "You've studied their patterns. Can you find where this weapon is hidden?" Elias hesitated. "If I study their energy signals, maybe. But the mission will be dangerous." Syra smiled faintly. "Danger doesn't stop us." He looked at her carefully. "Then let me go." She froze. "What?" "I can move faster alone," he said. "I'll infiltrate their base, gather data, and find the weapons core." "Absolutely not," she said instantly. "You're human, Elias. Your body can't handle Zikran gravity or their air. You'll die." He looked at her calmly. "If I don't go, your people might die instead." Her voice dropped. "You don't even belong to this world. Why risk yourself for us?" He gave a small smile. Because fear doesn't stop me, it reminds me what's worth saving. Syra wanted to refuse, but deep inside she knew he was the only one who could do it. The Zykrans wouldn't expect a lone, fragile human. He could slip through unnoticed. Still, the thought of sending him alone filled her with something she had never known before. A deep, sharp ache that felt worse than any wound. "Then I'm going with you," she said finally. Elias shook his head. "No, you have to lead your fleet. If I fail, you must still protect your people." Her golden eyes met his calm blue ones. "You think I can let you walk into death while I hide behind a command chair?" "It's not hiding," he said gently. "It's leading." For the first time in her life, she felt something close to fear. And it wasn't for herself. It was for him. The infiltration plan was set in motion. Elias took a small stealth craft and disappeared into the darkness of space. Syra watched from the command deck as his ship vanished among the stars. Her crew remained silent, sensing their commander's unease. Drek spoke softly. "Commander, he knew the risk." "Yes," Syra said, "but knowing doesn't make it easier." Hours passed with no word. The fleet waited at the edge of enemy space, hidden among the asteroids. The silence felt endless. Finally, a faint signal blinked on the screen. Elias's transmission. Syra leaned forward. "Open channel." His voice came through, faint but steady. "I found it. The weapon core is on the Zykran flagship. I'm setting charges now." "Elias, get out of there," Syra ordered. The war had ended. The stars that once burned with fire and destruction were quiet now. The great Zykran Empire had fallen, its fleet scattered like dust in the wind. Verith was safe. The skies above its golden cities were calm again. Yet for Commander Syra Ven, peace did not feel like victory. She stood at the window of the Grand Command Hall, watching the twin suns rise over the horizon. The light painted her silver armor in shades of red and gold, but her heart felt empty. The cheers of her people echoed far below, but their joy couldn't reach her. It had been weeks since the final battle, the day the Zykran flagship exploded in a blinding flash of light. The day Captain Elias Ward, the human who had taught her the meaning of courage, had vanished. Syra had ordered every scanner, every ship, and every probe to search for him. But space is vast and hope grows smaller with every passing day. Still, she waited. Every night she replayed his last words in her mind. "Fear is not your enemy, Syra. It reminds you of what you care about." At the time, she hadn't understood. But now, standing alone amid the silence of peace, she finally did. For the first time in her life, she knew what it felt like to lose someone who mattered. Days turned into weeks, and the people of Verith began to rebuild. The ruins of war gave way to new gardens, new homes, and laughter once again filled the air. Yet Syra felt like an empty shell. Her officers tried to celebrate her. They called her the defender of Verith, the warrior who never yielded, the legend who stood unshaken even when the stars burned. But she no longer felt fearless. When the younger soldiers looked at her, they saw a hero. But when she looked at herself, she saw only a woman who had learned too late what courage truly was. In quiet moments, she walked through the ship docks where human technology, collected from the remains of Elias's ship, was being studied. The engineers marveled at the simplicity of human design. "Primitive," they said. "Weak materials." But Syra smiled softly. "Maybe not weak," she whispered. "Maybe strong in ways we don't see." One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Syra received an alert. A small shuttle from a distant outpost had arrived, carrying an encrypted message. The markings were old, Earth symbols faded but clear. Her heart began to race. The message played on a holographic screen. A static-filled voice echoed through the chamber. "This is Captain Elias Ward. If anyone receives this, I'm alive. Stranded near the edge of Zykran space. Systems failing. Requesting aid." For a moment, Syra couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled. A strange human reaction she had once considered weakness. Then, without hesitation, she shouted, "Prepare a ship. We leave now." Her officers tried to stop her. "Commander, it could be a trap," one warned. Syra turned sharply, her golden eyes blazing. "Then let it be a trap. I would rather face fear than live with regret," and so, for the first time since the war ended, she led a mission not for victory, but for someone she truly cared about. The journey to the edge of Zykran space took 3 long days. The region was unstable, full of debris from destroyed fleets. Silence surrounded them, a cold reminder of how much had been lost. When they reached the signal's coordinates, all they found was a broken pod floating among shattered metal. The pod's surface was burned, but the life sign scanner blinked faintly. "Open it," Syra ordered. The engineers worked quickly, cutting through the damaged hatch. As the door hissed open, a wave of cold air spilled out. Inside, lying unconscious but alive, was Elias Ward. He looked different, thinner, pale, worn, but his chest still rose and fell. Syra stepped forward slowly, as if afraid he might disappear if she blinked. Her voice trembled. "You survived." Elias opened his eyes weakly. When he saw her, a faint smile touched his lips. "Took you long enough," he whispered softly. For a moment, the fearless warrior forgot her rank, her pride, everything. She knelt beside him and simply said, "You came back." He chuckled quietly. "Humans are stubborn, remember?" They brought Elias back to Verith for treatment. The doctors worked tirelessly to heal him. Amazed at how fragile yet resilient his body was, Syra stayed by his side through every procedure, ignoring every meeting and ceremony. She didn't care about politics anymore. During those quiet nights in the medical bay, Elias would tell her stories of Earth, of blue skies, oceans, and rain. Syra would listen with fascination. To her, the idea of water falling from the sky sounded like magic. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked once. "Every day," Elias said. "But I don't regret coming here. I met you." Syra felt her heart stir again, something strange and unfamiliar. For a warrior who had never feared anything, this emotion was terrifying. Yet she didn't want it to stop. Months passed, and life on Verith flourished. Elias slowly regained his strength and began helping the Verithi rebuild their systems. His simple human ideas improved their technology in ways their scientists had never imagined. But more important than his inventions was his influence. His calm presence began to change the way Verithi soldiers thought. They no longer saw fear as weakness but as a sign of care and purpose. They called this new philosophy the human code, a teaching that said, "Fear is not the end of courage. It is the beginning of understanding." Under Syra's leadership and inspired by Elias's words, the Verithi built a new alliance among the stars. Former enemies came together, learning from humanity's quiet strength. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the mountains, Syra and Elias stood on a high terrace overlooking the city. The air shimmered with the soft glow of distant stars. Elias looked at her and said, "You were never really fearless, were you?" Syra smiled slightly. "No, I just didn't understand fear before. I thought being brave meant feeling nothing. But now I see. True courage is feeling everything and still standing." Elias nodded. "That's what makes you human too, in a way." She turned to face him, her golden eyes reflecting the stars. "And you," she said softly, "taught me that even the smallest voice can change a world." There was silence between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of peace, of shared strength, and something deeper, respect, trust, and something like love, though neither said the word aloud. Years later, legends of the fearless commander and the human from Earth spread across galaxies. Children on distant worlds grew up hearing their story, not just of war, but of friendship, courage, and what it meant to truly feel alive. Syra would sometimes visit the ancient Hall of Heroes where her armor stood on display. But she no longer felt like the statue of old. She was no longer the warrior who never felt fear. She was something greater, a being who had faced fear, learned from it, and grown stronger because of it. And somewhere deep in her heart, she always remembered that small, fragile human who had shown her that the bravest hearts are not made of steel or power, but of compassion and hope. One night, long after the crowds had gone, Syra stood alone beneath the stars. Elias joined her quietly, holding 2 cups of warm tea, a habit he had taught her. They looked up at the endless sky. Syra spoke softly, almost to herself. "You know, I used to think nothing in the universe could frighten me." Elias smiled gently. "And now?" She looked at him, her voice filled with warmth. "Now I'm afraid of only one thing." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" She smiled faintly. "Losing what makes me human." And with that they stood together, side by side, as the stars burned quietly above them, no longer symbols of war but of peace, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a fearless warrior and the human who taught her how to feel. The stars of the Orion expanse glowed like silver dust scattered across a dark velvet sea. Far from any trade routes or crowded worlds, the quiet station called Ardent Spire floated above a blue-white moon. Inside, scientists from many species worked together, studying history, art, and the mysteries of life itself. Among them was Sarika Valrin, a scholar of the Zelathi, a tall and slender species known for their calm minds and gentle voices. Sarika's large violet eyes held curiosity but never anger. Her people believed they had risen beyond the need for violence centuries ago. In their language, the word for war was no longer taught to children. Sarika's life was peaceful. She spent her days surrounded by glowing data screens and ancient relics, reading about extinct civilizations. Yet one subject always caught her attention: the ancient species known as humans. They had once lived on a planet called Earth and spread among the stars, but their colonies had disappeared generations ago. The archive said humans were brave but reckless. They fought wars even when peace seemed possible. To Sarika, that sounded absurd. How can a race survive if they destroy themselves? She would often ask. The younger scholars laughed softly, agreeing that humans were only a myth of a violent past. One evening, Sarika walked through the silent observation deck. The moon's glow filled the glass panels, bathing her in pale light. She held a small holographic tablet, reading one of the last known human transmissions. A human voice echoed softly. To whoever finds this message, remember us not for our wars but for the will that drove us to survive. She frowned slightly. Will to survive? That was such a strange idea. The Zelathi had no word for fight. They believed reason solved everything. To fight was to fail. Her friend and assistant Kieran entered the room, carrying a tray of luminous fruit drinks. Still reading about the dead warriors? He teased gently. You should rest, Sarika. There is no wisdom in studying ghosts. Sarika smiled faintly. Perhaps, but ghosts teach us what not to become. She turned off the projection and gazed at the stars again. Humans were strange, always struggling, even when they could have lived in peace. Kieran shrugged. Then it is good they are gone. The galaxy is better without creatures who enjoy conflict. Sarika nodded absently. Deep inside, however, a quiet curiosity remained. Were humans truly gone? And if they were, why did their messages sound so alive? Weeks passed in the same calm rhythm. Research, meals, sleep. The galaxy seemed endless and safe, until one day something broke that silence. An alert blared through the station's halls. Unidentified object approaching at sublight speed, the computer's calm voice announced. Scientists rushed to their posts, whispering in confusion. Sarika joined them in the command chamber, where the massive screen displayed a dark metal shape drifting through space. It's an ancient ship, said Kieran, scanning the data. No active signal. No known design. Sarika leaned forward. Can we identify its origin? The technician hesitated, then pointed to the faded emblem on the hull. A blue circle surrounded by white stars. Beneath it, barely readable, were the letters. UNE. Sarika's heart skipped. United Nations of Earth, she whispered. A wave of silence spread through the room. Everyone turned to her in surprise. Impossible, Kieran said quickly. Humans are extinct. That ship must be centuries old. Then we'll confirm, Sarika replied firmly. Prepare a recovery team. Hours later, Sarika stood inside the derelict craft. The air smelled of metal and dust. Her light flickered across walls covered in frost. The ship's systems were dead, but the interior was preserved by vacuum. Symbols and diagrams marked the corridors, short, angular writing of human language. Her pulse quickened. Every detail felt like stepping into a story she had studied for years. In the central chamber, her team found something sealed behind a transparent pod. Inside lay a figure, broad-shouldered, wrapped in an old uniform. Frost crystals covered his face, but his features were unmistakably human. Kieran's voice shook. He's still intact. Is he dead? Sarika checked the readings. No, in stasis. He's alive. Everyone froze. For a moment, no one dared to speak. The silence was heavier than gravity. Bring him to Ardent Spire, Sarika said finally. We'll thaw him carefully. He could be the last of his kind. The revival chamber filled with soft light and mist. Machines hummed quietly as Sarika monitored the process. Her people gathered behind safety glass, watching history breathe again. Minutes stretched like hours. The frost melted from the man's skin. His chest rose sharply as the pod opened with a hiss. He gasped for air, coughing violently. Sarika stepped forward, cautious but calm. "Can you hear me?" she asked gently. The man blinked several times, eyes adjusting to the brightness. They were a sharp shade of gray, focused and alert. He looked around, confused but composed. "Where am I?" he asked in a low, rough voice. "You are aboard the research station Ardent Spire," Sarika explained. "You were found in cryosleep on a ship marked UNE. I am Sarika Valrin of the Zalathi." The man stared at her in disbelief. "Zalathi? Never heard of." "Wait," he rubbed his temples. "How long was I out?" "Approximately 900 years, she said softly. His expression darkened. 900? The fleet's gone then." Sarika tilted her head. "Fleet?" He looked at her straight. "Earth Defense Fleet. I was Captain Elias Ward." The title sounded strange to her ears. "Defense?" she repeated. "You were a soldier?" Elias gave a tired smile. "Was. Guess I still am if I'm breathing." Sarika studied him carefully. There was no fear in his tone, only quiet strength. Something about him unsettled her. In the following days, Elias adjusted quickly to the station's routine. He learned that war, conflict, and armies were things of the past. The Zalathi and most other species had abandoned them long ago. Sarika spoke with him often, fascinated by his memories. He told her about Earth, its blue oceans, crowded cities, and endless skies. He described the long wars that tore humanity apart, and how they finally united to protect one another. "War was never something we wanted," he said one evening, as they looked out at the stars. "But sometimes you have to fight to keep what matters." Sarika frowned slightly. "We believe peace is achieved through understanding, not fighting." Elias nodded slowly. "That's good if everyone believes the same. But if someone doesn't, peace becomes a fragile thing." His words lingered with her long after he left. Later that week, Sarika joined a council meeting. The scientists discussed moving the human to another facility for study. Some argued he was too dangerous, that ancient warriors carried unpredictable instincts. Sarika defended him calmly. "He has shown no harm. His knowledge could be invaluable." Kiran shook his head. "Knowledge of fighting? We have no need for such things. But what if we do one day?" she asked quietly. The question silenced the room. For the first time in her life, Sarika felt uncertainty about her people's peaceful ideals. The galaxy was vast, and not all who lived in it shared their harmony. That night, alarms shattered the calm once more. "Pirate ships inbound." "They're locking weapons," shouted the operator. The station shook under the impact of plasma fire. Panic spread. The Zalathi scientist had no soldiers, no defenses. People ran through the corridors, frightened and untrained. Sarika stumbled toward the control deck when she saw Elias already there, strapping on an emergency suit. His face was calm but determined. "You have security drones?" he asked quickly. "Yes, but they are not programmed for combat," she replied, breathless. "Then they will be," Elias said, pressing his hand against the console. His fingers flew across the interface faster than she could follow. Within moments, the drones reactivated, forming a defensive line across the docking bay. "How do you know how to do this?" Sarika asked. He glanced at her, eyes fierce yet steady. "Because this isn't the first time someone's attacked my home." As explosions echoed outside, Sarika realized the truth her studies had missed. Humans didn't fight because they loved war. They fought because they refused to surrender life to fear. Watching Elias command calmly under fire, she felt something awaken inside her, a strange mix of respect, fear, and hope. For the first time in her peaceful life, Sarika Valrin began to understand what it meant to stand and fight.